Lottery. The drawing of lots, as the final method of appointment of electoral magistrates in Mexico, minimum elements in the appointment system to strengthen the institutional culture of electoral magistrates. Part 3. From my perspective, it is unjustified that members of the highest bodies in Mexico are not required to pass an exam that demonstrates a minimum level of competencies, skills, and legal knowledge. In that sense, there is also no standard for evaluating the curriculum or experience in the public or private sector of those who are not part of the judicial career and aspire to be part of the jurisdictional bodies. Likewise, I believe that the inclusion of random appointment methods, such as drawing lots, has been omitted in order to avoid unfinished procedures due to lack of agreements, as well as to ensure the absence of personal commitments from those who have the power to appoint the individuals in charge of the highest judicial bodies. Certainly, the idea is to timely achieve the appointments to fill the vacancies and prevent the magistracies from becoming transmission belts of the political elites or the real power factors, because the only personal, ethical and political commitment should be with the institutions of the Republic. However, considering the significance of the constitutional function that is bestowed upon them, the selection of the members of the highest courts of justice cannot be solely entrusted to the result of the elections or even to mere happenstance. Therefore, the proposed solution takes into account the need to demonstrate the minimum profile and experience required to perform position 1. Once these aspects are fulfilled, then yes, designate through a lottery those who will finally perform the function, without having to show gratitude to those who appointed them, because in this way, the influence that the real factors of power or wild powers in terms of fagioli are limited may have on the decision-making of great importance for Mexican democracy, which are within the competence of electoral constitutional justice. In this sense, the proposal to modify the appointment system for federal or local electoral magistrates in order to guarantee a deferential institutional culture towards the other branches of government is based on 3 elements. A competitive examination conducted by the Federal Judiciary Council, in which general legal knowledge and specialized knowledge in electoral law are demonstrated, as well as respective interviews and essays on a relevant topic or criterion of the Supreme Court of Justice or the Federal Electoral Tribunal, in order to strengthen the electoral justice system. B. The requirement of a minimum of 10 years of jurisdictional experience, or in other activities that involve the collective decision-making with a directly verifiable material impact on the daily life of the citizens. C is the designation of electoral magistrates through a lottery conducted by the Senate of the Republic from a list approved by a simple majority of the members of the Supreme Court of Justice of the nation, with the names of the individuals with the highest averages, whose maximum number of individuals will correspond to the multiplication of 3 proposals for each vacant magistracy, and will adhere to the principle of parity, except in the case of competitions exclusively called for women. It should be noted that in the cases of the Superior Court and the Specialized Court, which have a single headquarters, as well as in relation to the local courts, whose assignment would be defined from the moment the participant is registered in the process, a second draw would be carried out to assign the respective assignment for the regional courts, which would be granted according to the number drawn in descending order for each constituency number, starting with the first and successively until all the vacant magistracies in the respective regional courts are exhausted. Regarding the upper chamber and local courts, once the random selection process is completed, the appointment and swearing-in ceremony would take place to fill the number of magistrate positions to be elected. In this order, the proposed method of designation includes 3 aspects that I consider essential in any appointment of electoral magistrates at either the federal or local level. Indeed, I reckon that with the proposal, it meets the evaluation of the basic knowledge, and also requires the minimum experience for the job performance. Likewise, it is ensured through random selection that there are no direct links or commitments between the magistrates and the political forces that appointed them, in addition to the additional benefit that the corresponding regional assignment would also be done by lottery, inhibiting commitments with local or regional political forces. 4 is necessary the constitutional and legal reform for the appointment by drawing lots of the electoral magistracies in Mexico. The ideal scenario would be for the appointment method of the electoral magistrates to be determined in the final stage by the legislative power, similar to the system outlined for the appointment of the INE councillors in Article 41 of the Constitution. In other words, it is important to explicitly establish in Articles 99 and 116, Section 4, Clause C, fifth numeral of the Political Constitution of the United States of Mexico that, in addition to the qualified vote, 2/3 of the members present are required. In case of absence of legislative agreements, the random selection mechanism for the final stage of the appointment of electoral magistrates. Regarding this, it's worth noting as a well-known fact that the current legislature has been unsuccessful in its attempts to achieve constitutional changes in elections. However, I reckon that the proposed method would help overcome the lack of consensus, not only regarding the constitutional reform, but even at a legal level, to untangle the pending appointments. In this order, it would also be necessary for the legislative power to make adjustments to the legal framework to modify Articles 107 and 108 of the General Law of Electoral Institutions and Procedures, as well as Article 179 of the Organic Law of the Judicial Power of the Federation, so that in the upcoming calls issued by the judicial power of the Federation with the objective of electing candidates for electoral magistrates, a selection process by opposition is established, similar to the one used for circuit magistrates, so that interested parties can participate in the various stages of a certain, transparent, and objective competition. Certainly having a constitutional and legal framework for the appointment of magistrates through competitive exams would allow for addressing the social demand for the democratization of electoral courts, ensuring a completely open procedure for members of society. At the same time, it would establish a minimum requirement of knowledge, experience and skills to access the delicate electoral judicial function. As can be seen, only in the event that the necessary constitutional majority is achieved, the appointment system through random selection of the members of the electoral chambers and tribunals would be adopted, in the final phase of the procedure that the Senate of the Republic must implement, and consequently, at least the direct commitments derived from the top-down decision of interest groups, or political negotiation, would be broken, since the final decision on the integration and assignment of the elected officials would be left to chance. It should be noted that this method of selection has already been used in the appointment of the latest INE councillors, which allowed to overcome the immobility or lack of consensus in the appointments, and thus, the timely integration of said electoral administrative body.